Hey, y'all, man. Welcome back to another edition of Everything Football 62. I'm your host, Jonathan Big Tex Johnson, a.k.a. Uncle Tex, a.k.a. Professor Tex. This kind of like off the cuff, man. I just got through watching I Am Athlete, with the guys over there, Ocho, Fred Taylor, my man used to play for the Dolphins, Channing, I think that's his name and whatnot, Brandon Marshall, and they got Prime on there and whatnot, Coach Prime, Prime time, and they were talking about, he brought up the whole Hall of Fame thing. He said, I'm going to talk about it because nobody else seems like they're going to talk about it. And he said, there's a Hall of Fame and then there's a Hall of Game. He said, Hall of Fame and then there's another room up there. You know what I'm saying? And so he said, it's open season. They're letting anybody in. He go to Fred Taylor and say, yeah, you should be in there before that and this is that and the other. And all that. Although Fred Taylor, nice back, when I think of Hall of Fame type running backs and whatnot, or great running backs, I don't think of Fred Taylor. Fred Taylor was a nice back, but I don't think of Fred Taylor as that. My criteria for running backs, real simple. At least 12,000 yards and 70 touchdowns at the very minimum, right? You go back and you look, Thurman Thomas has 12,000. Come on. You think of Thurman Thomas. It's a litany of these guys that we can sit back and start and go back and look at. You know what I'm saying? I'm like this here. And I've said this. My criteria has always been, if you play like at least 9-10 years, of that 9 to 10 years, you need to be dominant at least 5-6 years, dominant and consistent of that time. All pro nods and Pro Bowls. Pro Bowls used to be kind of difficult to get into. Now it's like an open season. It's like it's a participation trophy, more or less, in a sense, right? So the science is this. So I'm looking at Fred Taylor's number. Fred Taylor has some pretty good numbers. Fred Taylor was named to one Pro Bowl. One. If you go back to his teammate, that would end up being his teammate, and then end up eventually taking over the role, and I think Fred Taylor ends up being traded to the Pats and whatnot. You go back to somebody like, let's say, it was Maurice Jones-Drew, right? We go to Maurice Jones-Drew, and you look him up, and my man was a 3-time Pro Bowler, and he led the league in rushing. He actually led the league in rushing at one point in time. And it's like that has to count for something. You know what I'm saying? So, and he didn't play as long as Fred played, but he was a 3-time Pro Bowler and 1-time All-Pro. Fred Taylor had 1 Pro Bowl nod. Jones-Drew, he led, and that's not taking anything from Fred Taylor. It's no disrespect. But I'm like, see, you have to hold some of these guys somewhat accountable to an extent on the different things that they call themselves doing. So this is my thing. Your leading rusher of all time, obviously, is Emmitt Smith, right? Emmitt Smith from age 21 for about 5 or 6 year run, the Super Bowl years, right? Emmitt Smith damn near amassed 100 touchdowns. He led the league like 4 times in rushing. He's an MVP, Offensive Player of the Year. You got to at least do something like that to me at least twice. At least led the league twice. You got to be a badass for at least a couple years. I can't just put you up in the Hall of Fame just because, okay, I rushed for 1,000 yards for like 15 fucking years. Rushing for 1,000 yards in a 16 game season, that's 62.5 yards per game. That's basically what that is. That ain't a lot. So the criteria for me, at least 12 and up. You got to be doing 12 and up, man, to make it look something, like make it look good, right? You go back to Jim Brown, somebody that averaged 104 yards for his entire career. He dominated. You go back to O.J. Simpson in the 70s. In a 5-year stretch, he led the league 4 times. Somebody like Walter Payton. Walter Payton put up great numbers even when he was young. But when he got into his 30s, from about age 29 to 30 to about his last year, his yards were ridiculous in what he actually did. You have to put them up against who is considered the best at that time. You have to put that person in. You have to look at their career and you have to judge them by, okay, what did they do, right? How did they do it, and everything, right? You have to do that. So we look at somebody like Walter Payton's, and this is just, and just kind of just notice this. You're talking about someone that great yards, great years that came up. You look at his yards at age 29 to age 32. right? 1421, 1684, 1551, 1333. That is 29, 30, 31, 32 years old. And we're not even talking about what he did in his 20s. We're not even talking about that. In his early 20s. We're not even talking about that. It's guys that don't have yards like that coming out of the league fresh face at 21, from 21 to 25. They have to do something. You have to put up yards like that. You have to be able to do something like that, something similar. I just can't put you up in the hall just because you're putting it all. Here now you got LaShawn McCoy coming in talking about, well, he deserved to be in the Hall of Fame. Because of what? Good back. Give it to him. Led the league once. All pro once. But he's talking about, well, I got 2 rings. You didn't even play it in the games. You didn't even play. You had that one season in Buffalo. You got traded. That was it. Nothing else. You know what I'm saying? And so it's like, you can't just throw these guys in there just to throw them in there because, well, they played this amount of time, they did this and they did all these other different things. It's like, no, it got to be better than that. It has to be a template, especially at the running back, at any position. It has to be a template like, this guy did this. In the modern game, he did this right here. Are you doing that? You're going to put Frank Gore rushed for 16, almost 1,700 yards. I think it was 2006. Frank Gore's only rushed for over 1,200 yards twice. Everything else has basically been 1,100 yards. And that's basically the average. And he's still playing. So you're going to put him in there for longevity aspects of it? What are we going to put him in? You're going to put him in there? Oh, he played a long time. Even Curtis Martin, I don't think of Curtis Martin as that type of back, but he was consistent for a long time. And in the age 31, he rushed for damn near 1,700 yards. That's kind of unheard of. And I think that's what put him over the top to put him in the league because he played a long time and whatnot. And I think that's what put him in there. But I don't, when you think of great backs, I don't look at Curtis Martin. You start talking about Emmett, Walter, Dickerson, LaDainian Tomlinson, and them guys like that, man. I mean, the list is endless. Jim Brown's, the dominance that these guys got. You have people with Franco Harris. Franco was on 4 goddamn Super Bowls. He gonna have to go somewhere in there, and he had the yards to back it up because he played a nice while. I think led the league maybe once, I believe, in rushing at one time. But he was big back always there, and he was on winning teams. And so, and then was the first guy to rush for over, had the record 150 yards rushing, I think, in Super Bowl 9. So when you think about those particular guys, man, it's like the template you have to come up with a template and what these guys did. Franco Harris rushed for 12,120 yards in his career, right? Crazy to see him in Seahawks uniform. He led the league one time in rushing touchdowns one time. But Franco had some good years for back, especially back during that particular time, right? For that time frame. Right? 91 touchdowns. Things like that got to count for something. You have to start some of those type of attributes. Not every back is not going to have it. You look at Dickerson, what he did coming to the league at age 23 years old. From 83 to 88, 89, out of a 6 or 7 year span, he led the league in rushing 4 years and then was averaging all those years that he led the league in over 100 yards per game, 90 touchdowns. You have to put in some dominant years like that, in my opinion, to become a Hall of Famer and be considered a great back. You go to Marshawn Lynch. He had some decent years over there, a couple of years in Buffalo. But Marshawn Lynch was basically, he put in a couple of decent years. I was like, where's the yards at? And he's, quite frankly, has fucked around the past 3 or 4 years. I don't even know if he's retired. Is he still playing? Whatever the hell he's doing now. But he'll probably get in because he has a ring. And he has probably 2 of the best runs in the history of the game. So you could give him that. But is he an Adrian Peterson? No. Adrian Peterson right now is the only back right now that I put them up in that upper echelon of like that guy. He is that guy. He's that dominant. He's that guy. He's that dude, right? And and deservedly so. It's hard for me to really look at anybody else right now that really compares to that. And that might be, oh, that's, hey man, you kind of, this, that, and the other. I mean, he's at 14,000 yards right now. And he's just kind of holding on, messing around. But he's a physical specimen. I mean, 7-time Pro Bowler, 4-time All-Pro. MVP, Offensive Rookie of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year. Them other guys got to do something like that. Fred Taylor don't have that. Shady don't have that. He doesn't have that. And that's when people got to look at that. You looking at somebody, what? I mean, it's like you look at what was done, and those things have to attribute that to certain things. So his first few years, age 22, 1341, 1760, 1383, 1298, still hit 970 yards in 2011. Then hit the 2097. 1266, 75, blew his joint out, and then come back and do 1485. Led the league 3 years. You have to be able to do something like that. You have to have some of those credentials. You have to have had at least 2 of those years, and then have a consistency of them guys playing the sport, being good, consistent, and have at least 2 or 3 years where you at least you're the baddest joker, you're one of the baddest motherfuckers out there. And some of them guys don't have that. Not consistently. Not for a 2 or 3 year span. You get somebody like Sean Alexander. I did a show on Sean Alexander. Sean Alexander has 100 touchdowns. He's like ranked number 9, 10, or 11. And rushing he has 100 touchdowns. And it was a 3 year span where he was the shit for a 3 year span. But then he fell off the cliff after that MVP season. Because he came into Washington. Got to have something, man. Got to have a little bit more on the resume, in my opinion, to get to that echelon. Subscribe to the page, like the page, subscribe, hit some comments down, and we go from there, man. And like I tell you guys all the time, there is no GOAT, there's no greatest of all time as long as time's still going on. I tell you guys all the time, numbers don't lie and get emotional. People do. We be back.